We're going to read today about this magnificent, interesting album, Eno and Fripp's Evening Star. So, what's this all about then? Let me read out some information for you. Firstly, this requires me to read aloud some of the behind-the-scenes information associated with Eno and Fripp's the previous collaboration they had together, which is 73's No Pussyfooting. Let me read this out aloud. Brian Eno invited Robert Fripp to his London home studio in September 1972. Eno was then experimenting with a tape delay feedback system that he first devised while studying at the Winchester School of Art, and further described in a score called Delay and Decay, published in late 1966. The system had been used earlier by Terry Riley, an anonymous ORTF engineer in Paris in 1963, and named the time lag accumulator. Two reel-to-reel tape recorders are set up side by side, and sounds recorded on the first deck would be played back by the second deck, then routed back into the first deck to create a long looping tape delay. Fripp played guitar over Eno's loops, while Eno selectively looped or recorded Fripp's guitar without looping it. The result is a dense, multi-layered piece of early ambient music. This technique later came to be known as Frippatronics. No Pussyfooting's first track, which fills one side, is a 21-minute piece titled The Heavenly Music Corporation. Fripp originally wanted the track titled The Transcendental Music Corporation, which Eno didn't allow as he feared it would make people think they were serious. It was recorded in 2 takes, first creating the background looping track, then adding an extended non-looped guitar solo over the backing track. This track features Fripp's electric guitar as the sole sound source. The second track, Swastika Girls, which fills the other side, was recorded almost a year after the Heavenly Music Corporation. In August 1973 at Command Studios at 201 Piccadilly in London, where Fripp's King Crimson had recorded their acclaimed Lark's Tongues in Aspic album earlier that year. The track employed the same technique as the Heavenly Music Corporation, except Fripp played to a background electronic loop created by Eno on VCS3. Fripp and Eno took the tapes of Swastika Girls to British record producer George Martin's AIR studio at Oxford Circus to continue mixing and assembling the track there. The track's title refers to an image of nude women performing a Nazi salute that was ripped from a discarded pornographic film magazine founded by Eno at AIR Studios. Eno stuck the image on the recording console while recording the track with Fripp, and it became the title of the track. And so then, just for a bit of Evening Star, this album's recording and the preceding 7-show European tour by Fripp and Eno marked Fripp's first output after disbanding King Crimson, and his last before temporarily retiring from music, at the time thought to be permanently, to study at the International Academy for Continuous Education in Sherborne House. AllMusic described Evening Star as a less harsh, more varied affair, closer to Eno's then developing idea of ambient music than what had come before in No Pussyfooting. The first 3 tracks are serene, gentle tape-looped guitar textures performed by Fripp and accented with treatments, synthesizer and piano by Eno. Track 4, Wind on Wind, is a short excerpt from Eno's solo project Discreet Music, released a week after Evening Star. It is not an exact duplication from that release, being mixed slightly differently. Eno had originally intended Fripp to use the material which became Discreet Music as a backing track to play over in improvised live performances. The second half of the album is a 28-minute piece of drone music titled An Index of Metals, in which guitar notes are accumulated in a loop, with distortion increasing as the track progresses. The album's cover is a painting by the artist Peter Schmidt. Now I'd like to read out aloud this very fascinating and informative piece of history. This article here, from Luca Osborne, published in August last year, 2022. Frippatronics, how Robert Fripp and Brian Eno brought looping to life. Frippatronics. Ambient tape looping brought to you by Robert Fripp and Brian Eno. It might not sound new, but in 1972 it was. Frippatronics. What did you just say? Frippatronics is a tape looping method popularized by guitar virtuoso Robert Fripp. Looping may not seem like a new idea. You're likely to find a loop pedal under the foot of most street buskers. However, in 1972, the musical world had never seen anything quite like it. Best known as a founding member of the progressive rock band King Crimson, Robert Fripp was never one to shy away from experimentation throughout his career. Where his days of King Crimson were defined by blistering time signatures and deranged key changes, Fripp's solo work centered around novel studio practices like the Frippatronics we're delving into. During King Crimson's downtime, Fripp spent time pursuing side projects. This included studio sessions and collaborations of many prominent artists, including David Bowie, Peter Gabriel, Talking Heads, notably even contributing sounds to the Windows Vista operating system. Perhaps most fruitful of these pairings was his work with Brian Eno. Eno in the early 1970s was transitioning away from his glam project Roxy Music to pursue his own experimental career. In September of 1972, the pair met in Eno's London home studio where he had set up a tape system developed by avant-garde composers Terry Riley and Pauline Oliveros. The record head on the first Revox tape deck was routed to the playback head on the second deck, which then ran back to the first deck. The result of this constant recording and playing was a delay loop, the length of which, usually 3 to 6 seconds, depended on the distance between the tape decks. During the session, Fripp played the guitar over Eno's loops, which were either selected for looping or bypassed. This allowed Fripp to add to the established loop or solo over what was essentially a backing track. By nature of the design, the session was recorded on a master tape on the first machine. The recycled delay would decay slightly on each return, giving it a characteristic not unlike tape delays of the day, such as the Echoplex or Space Echo. However, the longer reels of the tape recorders allowed for a longer delay time. The result was a mesmerizing ambient drone, an oral depiction of an artist continually layering paint. Eno and Fripp sessions resulted in the 1973 album No Pussyfooting, a stream of haunting loops that many consider being one of the pioneering ambient albums. The duo reunited in 1974 to produce Evening Star, taking the idea further with Fripp's meandering guitar hooks and lush soundscapes formed from Eno's layering of piano and synthesizer. Around the same time, Eno produced the album Discreet Music. This work used a lot of looping and would set the scene for his later ambient releases such as Ambient 1 Music for Airports. Fripp and Eno embarked on a short European tour in 1975, displaying their unique sound. The pair toured with their tape rig, with Eno frequently using his EMS Synthy AKS, an early portable synth, and Fripp using a fuzzed-out Les Paul ran through high-watt amplifiers. The pair would be seen together on works such as David Bowie's Heroes, however, would not release another album together for another 30 years. Robert Fripp continued to develop the looping method, creating a more ergonomic version that he could use to perform solo. This was the term Frippatronics was coined for by his then-girlfriend, the poet Joanna Walton. He went on to work with Peter Gabriel, adding ambient textures to the ex-Genesis frontman's second album. Exposure, Fripp's first solo album, was released in 1979, and his Frippatronics tour followed the next year. Fripp developed offshoots for his technology, applied Frippatronics for rock settings, even delving into dance with Discotronics or looping with a disco beat and pure Frippatronics, no overdubs, original session tape. He continued to use the reel-to-reel method throughout his career, dabbling in digital loopers and delays, resulting in his 1990s soundscapes. Digital looping stations were clearer, more practical, and able to loop whole verses. However, they lacked the sense of warmth and spontaneity that the original tape machine technique possessed. For an aspiring ambient guitarist, however, there exist many modern digital recreations of tape delays, such as the Strymon El Capistan and the Boss RE20, which allow the player to stretch the delay time into Frippatronic lengths. While on the other hand, some looping pedals include wow and flutter options, both of which get close to Fripp's ambient magic, without the need to lug one's body weight in tape decks. We will close it here. Thanks again, my friends. I immensely appreciate it.